Hey, good afternoon. This is kind of a cool way to do this. I was looking forward to seeing everybody in person, but this is the next best thing. I want to thank everybody who was part of compiling the questionnaire. Um, I want to let you know I have answered all the 44 questions. We're trying to figure out a way to make it available to you online easily, because there's not a list right now that we could easily distribute it to. But of course, if you want to discuss anything in the questionnaire, we can just go through it as we talk. I'm going to talk generally just for a few minutes, try to keep it brief because I want as much time for questions as possible. I really respect the intelligence and the hard work and commitment of everybody on the phone, everybody in our movement, in our revolution movement and the Bernie movement that gave birth to it. As many of you know, I co-chaired Bernie's campaign in the state, and I traveled around the country with him, encouraging others to support him across the country, came in, support him in New Hampshire, and went all the way through. This campaign is really about extending Obama's legacy and making Bernie's vision real. The line that we start with Obamacare leads towards single payer. It doesn't lead towards Trump care. We will make sure that there is single payer in Maryland. Similarly, we will make sure that there's a high quality teacher in every classroom. What we're really focused on, quite frankly, is a back to basics approach to get our state and its institutions to work for everyone in a way that empowers people to make the most of their time on this planet and to make the most of the American dream, to make it real to all our families. So we'll make sure that everybody has high quality health care. We'll make sure that every teacher, every classroom has a good teacher. Everything else we want to do with public education really is leveraged off the quality of our teachers. And that means that they have to be properly, competitively compensated. It means that they have to be continuously trained. It will mean that the casino money will actually have to be spent to enhance our school. And we can no longer avoid having a tough conversation about the priorities of our state. That was the promise made to voters. The Kirwan Commission will tell us that there's $1 billion to $2.5 billion shortfall, and there's about $1 billion that comes from those casino revenues, and so it should be filling that gap. Similarly, we will make sure that there is universal pre-K, and we won't stop there. We will keep trying to find ways to get better education to our young people, all the way down into that year, those critical 0 to 3 years, where right now we have a real crisis as far as affordable preschool in this state, affordable childcare. I'm raising a 4-year-old, an 11-year-old, and an 18, now 19-year-old, it's all very, very clear to my family because we struggle with it too. Similarly, with regards to education, we will make sure that community college in our state is tuition free, and we won't stop there. The reality is that public university tuition used to be able to be paid all your fees, expenses with 9 hours of minimum wage work per week. Now that's up to 47. And that means that it's beyond the reach of many young people, but many others are driven into debt. And so we will get back where we used to be a long time ago in making public university tuition free. And we're doing all of this really to make our state as competitive as possible, to make it as innovative as possible, as attractive a place to build a big business, but also as easy a place as to start a small business. We will close corporate loopholes. It's part of how we will fund this. We will end mass incarceration. That's savings is part of how we'll fund this. But we'll also invest in growing our state. That means from the bottom up and from the top down. From the top down, what we're talking about is really doubling down on the strengths of Maryland. A lot of those are in technology. They are in health tech. One of the things that's great about our state is that this is a place where the tech community is focused on solving real problems. You don't see a lot of new Snapchat type apps coming out of Maryland. What you do see is people trying to solve cancer or cybersecurity. And as somebody who invests in tech for good, invests in social impact startups, and who mentors at the Johns Hopkins University Accelerator, I can tell you that we could go a lot further in leveraging Johns Hopkins as the world's greatest health sciences campus, which it is, the way California has leveraged Stanford as the world's greatest computer science campus, and linking Johns Hopkins to University of Maryland and our public HBCUs and all the other great STEM campuses, the way that California has linked Stanford ultimately to UC Berkeley and all of its great public universities, and in California, Hispanic serving institutions. And so we will, whether it's Baltimore or the I-270 corridor, really triple down on building out health tech. Similarly, in Prince George's, we have a hidden county. If you saw the movie Hidden Figures, 30 black women who helped put a man on the moon. We have the greatest concentration of blacks in STEM in that county of any place in the country. Santa Clara County, where Facebook is, has 1,300 computer professionals. Prince George's has 18,000, a little bit less than 18,000. And that means that as Facebook and Google and others seek to build expansion campuses, we luring them here to the I-95 corridor from Prince George's to downtown Baltimore, because we have a greater pool of diverse computer science talent than they do in California. And it's a way for them to access, and it's also more affordable to be here. So it's a way for them to access more computer programmers. They're facing a 1 million programmer shortage there in just a few years, but also a more diverse pool. They're under a lot of pressure to make their workforce more inclusive. They have less than 3% black programmers. Companies out here tend to have about 18%. And that will also mean, frankly, more opportunity for everybody, because blacks will still be a minority in those companies. So it means more for everybody. You do those two things, and you also start to build clean tech in our rural areas, Eastern Shore, Western Maryland. For instance, we will deploy, when I'm governor, loads of wind turbines off the southeastern shore of our state. If you look at the plan that folks like Josh Fox and the Sierra Club have put together for how each state can achieve 100% clean and renewable energy by 2050, and my goal will be to do it by then or faster. For Maryland, it means we have to disproportionately invest in offshore wind. Those turbines should be built here, should be maintained here. Similarly, we should invest in building solar panels here and other forms of clean and renewable energy. Wayne Gretzky said he profited in hockey by skating to where the puck is. And the reality is that the puck energy production in America is racing faster and faster towards clean and renewable energy. Price comes down, the power of the technology goes up. And the states that really make themselves hubs, regional hubs, for the production of those technologies will prosper, not just in the long term, but in the midterm. It's also really important, and hear me here, sisters and brothers, it's really important if we're going to, frankly, working trades unions properly aligned with the rest of us in the progressive movement, we've got to pull them away from the oil and gas industry. And the only way to do that is for clean tech jobs to begin to become good union paying jobs, not just $15 per hour good jobs, but like $60 per hour jobs for machinists. And building things, jobs that require a lot of skilled labor, like building and deploying and maintaining turbines, are the type of work that we can do that with. Education, I'm trying to think, public safety. We will also, quite frankly, as we downsize our prison system, we will do that primarily by making sure that addicts go to rehab, not to prison, making sure that mentally ill people through Healthcare for All get mental health care, not prison. Dealing with our urban housing crises, where we have loads of vacant housing across cities like Baltimore, and yet lots of homeless people, figuring out good solutions to house the homeless. But at the same time, frankly, we will build out homicide units in cities like Baltimore to make sure that we can get the shooters off the streets quickly, more than any other factor. And I teach criminal justice policy at Princeton University. Things people tend not to know about me is I invest a couple of days a week in Startups for Good, and I teach a couple of days a week at the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Policy at Princeton University. And when you're looking at what police can do, because there's really a lot that needs to be done throughout the ecology of a city like Baltimore to bring down the violence, but what the police can do to make a city safer is to make sure that shooters get off the street quickly, that they're caught quickly. More than, like how long they're going to go away for, or whether they get the death penalty, doesn't seem to impact whether or not they shoot and kill somebody. But if they believe that they'll get caught quickly, that's the one thing you can do to get them not to shoot somebody. And that means that Baltimore, to bring down its murder rate, to bring that down, they have to bring up their homicide case close rate. That means that you have to shift officers away from the misapplication and of the so-called broken windows theory and all this focus on nonviolent lifestyle crimes, and get them focused on catching shooters, catching pimps, catching rapists. And so we will make sure that there's proper investment, people can feel safe again. Baltimore County, 2/3 chance you get caught if you kill somebody. Baltimore City, 2/3 chance you get away with it. We will fix that. But we will also go deeper, because the reality is that whether you're in West Baltimore or you're in Western Maryland, a city like Cumberland, when the jobs leave, the drugs pour in, the violence goes up. And so things like raising the minimum wage, for instance, they don't just help an individual or his family or her family. They also pump money into the neighborhood and help small businesses flourish. Kind of two last notes, one on small businesses and one on the Trust Act. On the matter of small businesses and really building from the bottom up, we talked a bit about building the economy from the top down. From the bottom up, there's no replacement for an organically growing economy. And so that means that just as we'll take some of the money that we've become comfortable gambling on luring corporations to our state, and we will invest it in another type of economic risk-taking with obviously the goal of building our economy, which is backing the banks in our state to deploy cutting-edge computer technologies that allow them to assess risk earlier than they normally do, so that they can get lines of credit out the door earlier than they normally do. Right now, you have to wait till you have 2 years of tax returns in order to get a line of credit. A lot of companies a lot of companies grow themselves nearly to death in those 2 years, or they become reliant on factoring, which eats away their profits. We can empower our banks to use cutting-edge technologies to better analyze risk at 6 or 12 or 18 months than they're able to do at 24 to 30 to 35 months when a company finally has 2 years of tax returns. And therefore allow our small businesses, the detail shop, the flower shop, the startup, to grow faster earlier. Finally, again, kind of pragmatic, back to basics. Let's get our economy working for everybody, get our schools working for everybody, get our hospitals working for everybody again. We will pass the Trust Act. And in part, we'll do it not just with good organizing and advocacy, but by using the bully pulpit of the governor's office to talk both from our heart and our head. As progressives, we're quick to talk from our heart, to say it's the right thing to do, dignity for all, defend human rights, and all of that's true, and we will continue to talk that way. But we'll also talk from our head. To understand the Sanctuary Cities movement and how it starts, it's helpful to first remember that a lot of the ideas that today's Republicans criticize were started by yesterday's Republicans. Richard Nixon signed into law the bill that created the Environmental Protection Administration. Trump's essentially trying to destroy it. Mitt Romney created the seed for Obamacare, Romneycare. Trump's trying to destroy it. And similarly, while they're beating us up about sanctuary cities and threatening to defund cities, all of that really starts with a very conservative police chief in Los Angeles named Daryl Gates. You may recall him from Rodney King infamy. He stood up to the INS like a broken clock. He was, or maybe a broken digital clock, he was right once. Analog would be twice. I'm not sure he was ever right twice, but he's definitely right once. He stood up to the INS. This is kind of the last thought, and then we'll take questions. And the INS had come to him, and they'd said, look, we want your police officers to also act as immigration officers. We want them to help us deport people. We've got a list. And he said, I can't help you. So you bring me an actionable warrant for somebody who you believe is committed like a felony or a serious crime. Well, I'll help you like I'll help serve any other warrant. But if you just bring me a list with a bunch of immigrants who have stayed, past their date and came into the country without papers, there's nothing I can do for you. So my officers are police officers. They're here to make people safer. That's their only job at the end of the day. And with the moment they become immigration officers too, said the immigrants will stop talking to us. Not like some of them, like all of them. Because they'll be afraid one way or the other that they'll be implicated in somebody in their communities, family being torn apart. And they will become less safe. And that will make us all less safe because they will stop talking to the police when they need us. And ultimately that will make crime in our not just their community, but our entire city grow. So then those criminal networks will start to target them specifically because they know that they don't talk to the police. And it will just go from bad to worse. So no, thank you, but no, we will not be pretending to be immigration officers. We'll stick to our knitting and stay police officers. And so we will also, as we pass the Trust Act, talk about it in terms of simple public safety, even as we affirm our core values of human rights and human dignity. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. There's a lot covered in this, these 44 questions, and we're working diligently to make sure that all of you can access that as soon as possible. Thank you, and God bless.
Any questions, you should press the chat and send in your question. Oh, here's one. Here's a question, Ben.
Sorry.
Here's a question, Ben. How do you beat Hogan, and why are you better positioned to beat him than the other candidates? And I would add to that, than other candidates who claim to be progressive, some of whom have very progressive records in this state.
Sure. No, look, absolutely. Kind of a few pieces to that. First of all, we got to remember how Hogan won. Hogan won by 63,000 votes in a year that was a flood tide for Republicans and an ebb tide for Democrats. That year, he got about 60,000 of those 63,000 votes primarily from rural or Republican counties where voting had surged 15 to 30% above historic levels. For that reason, we don't believe he can get many more votes. But second, 125,000 Democrats who had turned out in 2010 did not show up in 2014. And we should not just assume that the sort of energy we saw, say, at the Women's March or the activism in the few months after Trump came into office will sustain for 2 years. The reality is that when you look at why folks didn't turn out, critical margins of folks didn't turn out in 2014 or even 2016, it really comes down, polls suggest that they felt betrayed on the economy. There was not a compelling reason for them to turn out. Their problems weren't being addressed. I'm the only candidate in this race, for instance, who stood up for single payer. Clearly, now look, other folks say the public option, but anybody who knows the issue with any sort of subtlety knows that the public option will all but foreclose us going to single payer. And so it'll be that sort of courage, clarity, and frankly, pushing solutions at the actual scale of the problem, not half measures, that will inspire constituencies to turn out. But we will also go further. In 2012, when I was president of the NAACP, Van Jones referred to the NAACP under my leadership as the unsung hero of the 2012 election, because we put 1.3 million unlikely voters into motion, got them to the ballot box, got them voting. In fact, there was a point in Chicago where the Obama campaign was quoting our voter registration numbers to their own staff because the NAACP effort was going much stronger than theirs in 2012. We ran the #1 door-to-door voter registration operation in the country. So we will build a movement. We will build a movement by inspiring people with bold ideas that add up to real change for them and their families. But we'll also build a movement as experienced organizers who are skilled not just in the art of inspiration, but the science of voter mobilization. We will deploy that better and more thoroughly than anybody else. My campaign manager is a guy named Travis Tazalar. He was on the Bernie Central Committee with me. In 2010, he ran the coordinated campaign for the state. He's 39-year-old former U.S. Marine, never ex. And he, that year in 2010, they put 120 paid organizers on the ground to turn out the vote. In 2014, it was 15. So we are full-throated, full-range Democrats, unafraid to talk about ending poverty and expanding opportunity, as well as unafraid to talk about defending civil rights and human rights. It's that full range that will help us inspire people, but it's the science and our years of knowing how to turn folks out that will make us the best bet to beat Hogan.
Here's a question from Stephanie. Hold on a second. I thought there was. How can we screen police officers for PTSD and ISD?
TSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic stress disorder.
All right, and remove or cycle them out of duty if they have mental health issues. That increase the risk they will use excessive force or kill people unnecessarily. How can we better screen for violent tendencies and lack of self-control in hiring? How do we train police officers to develop the emotional discipline not to react and to know their duty is to protect everyone, including the people they are pulling over, arresting?
Right. Stephanie, really, really brilliant, helpful question. I'm going to kind of take it in reverse order. At the end, you talked about, how do we train them? And the first thing is, we actually, it was possibly the chat open because there were 3 questions, but great, thanks. So the first thing that we will do, Stephanie, is we will pass state use of force standards and state use of force training standards that are up to date and cutting edge. In our country, we are the only country in the Western world that does not have national standards for police use of force or national standards for police use of force training. And actually, much of this is covered in a report on the Center for American Progress website called Towards Trust that I wrote after the uprisings in Baltimore in consultation with several dozen community-based organizations in Baltimore. So we will make sure that we have state-of-the-art standards in use of force and use of force training. And use of force training also includes de-escalation training. And so in a country like England, where most officers don't carry guns, they require their officers to be trained in when to use force, but also how to de-escalate tense situations every 6 months. In America, where those standards are typically balkanized amongst individual departments, so county and city level, the most common standard is you're trained one day, like 8 hours, one day at the academy, 9 to 5, that's it. And after that, as they say, it's training day. If you saw the movie, it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't go very well. And so we will keep training officers continuously, whether it's police officers or teachers we really have to be invested in continuing to help them evolve their skills, stay on the cutting edge of their craft. We want them to be the best of the best, and they do too. So, that's how we'll deal with that. With regards to mental health care, we have to destigmatize mental health care throughout our society, including with officers. And part of, having health care for all will do that because, quite frankly, many officers come from working class communities where not a lot of people, use mental health because they can't afford it. But we will also make sure that there's no disincentives, that there's no sort of like taking away your intelligence, for instance, classification, if you're in the intelligence unit or you're a detective, if you're suddenly, in counseling. And we will encourage it as part of officer fitness. But, something related to that is we will better use personality tests for screening out officers in the front end. There's actually a fairly narrow range of personalities, sort of like authoritarian type personalities, that are associated with officers killing people. This is why in some of the kind of more tragic videos we've watched where you can hear the voice of the officer, you'll hear the officer say, "But I told him not to do X," explaining why he killed him, when it doesn't really add up to anybody else who doesn't have that type of personality. And so we can actually filter out those personalities in the front end and make folks safer, in addition to providing good training and access to mental health throughout. Yes, and that actually answers your second question. So I believe that we've answered all three. Thank you, Stephanie. We're looking for more questions. Bear with us, and please feel free to send them if you have them. Neither Bob nor I are digital natives, so apologies to any millennials who just are probably cracking up watching us trying to navigate. Is there a...
I don't think that there are any others.
All right, we don't see any more questions. People want to speak up audibly if they have any questions. We're happy to accept voice questions as well, not just chat.
This is Stephanie. I have another question. Can I ask another one?
Of course, Stephanie, please.
Okay, so I liked that you were talking about good jobs and the technology corridor and all of that. I work for a small company started by a Taiwanese immigrant. I introduced you to her at the Democratic Ball. Yeah. She's a lovely person, and she's one of these people who started a business with the idea of using the profits to do good things. But we work in technology, and, I've been in the software development field serving as a contractor for federal government now for well over 20 years. And it's just a perpetual problem. It seems to have gotten worse, that we can't find homegrown tech talent, quite frankly. If there are lots of kids that we're sponsoring on visa because, they have technical skills. They come here with technical skills. We're having a really hard time. And as an American, I feel very bad about it because I'm very aware that there are a lot of, communities that kids are growing up without the benefits of the kind of training they need to compete. And these kids are coming here from other countries, immediately getting jobs and doing well and having their life set for them, where we have a responsibility in our country to, help provide those skills to our young people. So I guess my question is, do you have any special plans for helping us home grow that talent? Are there any public-private partnerships, that you're thinking about, or what ideas you have so that we can actually have kids from Baltimore and from other places in Maryland learning the skills to get these jobs?
No, thank you. Look, I'm right there with you. I'm lead investor at a company in 3 Maryland-based technology businesses. One founded by a Baltimore school teacher, another one founded by a Morgan State grad who spent some time in prison, and a third started by a fellow, actually I know from Columbia University, but out of Johns Hopkins. One's an ed tech company, one's makes it cheaper to call home from prison, and the other one monitors people like taking drugs like tuberculosis medication on their smartphones. And you run into this all the time. I mean, the secret here in Maryland, so the pride of Maryland in many ways, is that we are one of the few states that's truly great at attracting the best trained young people from across the country to come live here, work in industry, work in government. But what that masks is that we're as ragged when it comes to preparing our own young people as pretty much any other state south of the Mason-Dixon. We really have the opportunity, because we're one of the most progressive and forward-thinking and tech-infused states, to move forward just as fast as we want to. And when I'm governor, we will make sure that every child starting at age 6 is taught coding in the public schools, not like on like day of code, no, like every day. The way that we teach reading and writing and arithmetic, it will be as important to them in the future as those other skills. One, two, we will have a real robust ongoing relationship with business leaders in our state, so we know where the puck is headed and what they need, and that we're training young people in the types of coding that they'll need. And when you listen to business leaders, a lot of them were very clear: we don't need master's degree students who've gone through 4 years of undergraduate, it's gone 6 years into debt to do many of these jobs. If you just properly train people at the community colleges, we could take them straight out with 2 years of education or less. And so we'll also make sure, and we have some really cutting edge community colleges in Maryland, we'll make sure that we have the most dynamic relationship between industry and our public and private universities of any state in the country, and that we move into the area of stackable degrees, which is what tech often needs, right? So you're a computer scientist, but you don't know this language. Well, we'll teach you in that language at night in a month so you can get the next job, that type of thing. But if you do that 4, 5, 6, 8 times, maybe you'll end up with that master's degree in time, because you can stack up your degrees. So those are the 3 ways that make sure that we have a high quality teacher in every classroom and we're teaching coding. Make sure that we have a dynamic relationship with business leaders, so we're actually training young people in the ways that they're going to need for their workforce now and in the future. And then make sure that we make sort of retraining for existing opportunities as light and easy to do continuously as possible, because that's the nature of technical jobs. You've got to keep training.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to read?
Yes. From Stephen to everyone, the DC Metro is facing major problems with delays and safety issues. What are your plans for fixing the system? An overall vision for transportation across Maryland. Look, what's going on with the DC Metro, which is like the DMV Metro, is really quite sad. And the politics around it are kind of outrageous. I mean, they're blaming working people for decades of mismanagement and trying to take the money out of their pockets rather than just owning up to the problem and figuring out how we fix it going forward. DC Metro is one of the most impressive subway systems in the country, and we've got to figure out how to keep adapting it to folks' needs. That means ultimately extending it out further and further, but also creating bridges like the Purple Line to go cross county, the light rail system that when I'm governor, we will revive. Just as we will in Baltimore save the Red Line. Or I should say, save the Purple Line and revive the Red Line. At the same time, we need to embrace both long-term solutions and short-term solutions. We need more bus routes. We have areas that were 20 years ago were rural areas, and parts of Montgomery County, kind of further to the west, further to the north, where they have begun cutting bus lines. 2 in northern Montgomery County, when we should be adding them, but also we should be embracing bus rapid transit. They're using it. We're about to deploy it on North Avenue in Baltimore. We're about to deploy it on the I-29 corridor through Howard and Montgomery County. And we need to make sure that we frankly make full utilization. It's one of the best things that we can do to speed up the transportation bodies in cities and across rural and suburban areas quickly. At the same time, we need to have a real and robust conversation about the future of high-speed rail, figure out how we make it work. It is, it's been the future in Japan for like a generation, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking at its benefits here. It's what will make the geography of our state feel much smaller. And we also, have to really engage in smart urban planning and in smart planning, for our economy, figuring out how we bring more industry and more jobs to where people already live. People, searching for kind of safe and affordable places and move further and further out from the hubs, whether it's Baltimore or DC. And we need to be looking at, how we can bring jobs to them and not just bring them to their jobs.
Hey, Bob, this is Ukiah Bush. You mind if I jump in with a question? I'm not on a computer, so I can't.
Yeah, sure. Ukiah, there was one ahead of you online. Let me take that, and then I'll jump to you, and then I'm going to take Jimmy's question, then I'll take Ukiah's question, and then I'll take Susan's question, as in the order.
Okay.
Amen. Okay, sir? All right, so Jimmy, you don't have any experience as an elected official. True that. Does not put you at a disadvantage in running a big government and getting your legislation passed. It's interesting, right? I get two questions. I get this question, and then I get the, well, Hogan is so popular question. And Hogan hadn't been an elected official either. The reality is that there's a lot of, so the best training for being CEO of a state is being CEO of anything else. And I've been a CEO for most of my years since I was 26, before that often a lead organizer, and since then a business partner. And that really empowers you to communicate with folks, and frankly, to understand the importance of having tough conversations in a way that unites people and moves them forward. You do that in business all the time. You do it in organizing all the time. In my experience as head of the NAACP, and in my experience running trade associations and for small businesses, and now a partnership that invests in them, helps. I think has helped prepare me for executive office, and it's different than, say, legislative office. At the same time, what you do when you lead movements is actually get legislation passed. There are a lot of great ideas that, frankly, our delegates and senators submit every year, hoping that they'll get through, and they don't. And the kind of critical push comes from a movement like that led by the NAACP, as we did when I helped organize and lead, invest in the final push to pass, to abolish the death penalty in this state. And Martin O'Malley will tell you, in fact, he said it to the Baltimore Sun, if you read why I was Marylander of the Year in 2013, it was because of our, the decisive leadership that we provided when I was head of the NAACP to pass, to abolish the death penalty here. Also that year, I co-chaired the effort to pass the DREAM Act, also considered a long shot. We got that done, and played a significant role in deploying organizers and my voice and that of Julian Bonds and others to pass marriage equality. So it's that experience of actually leading, being a CEO, and that experience of organizing and knowing how to push and pull the levers of power that will make it possible for me to be one of the most effective governors we've ever had. And let me be really clear, y'all. We're not building a campaign to make me governor. We're building a campaign to make it easier for us to govern. When I was trained as a community organizer, I was told quite clearly, we don't elect politicians to make change happen. We elect politicians to make it easier for us, for our movements, our community-based organizations, to make change happen. And so we're going to run this campaign in a way that does not just result in good result in the primary and the general. We'll run this campaign in a way that makes our movement stronger as we run, because we'll need that wind at our backs when we take back the governor's office so that we can push forward our legislation. And the field operation that we will build in this campaign, we will keep deployed throughout my tenure as governor to make sure that we stay engaged as citizens in holding all of our elected officials, including me, accountable. One of the executives that's inspired me most is the mayor of Los Angeles, who's a dear old friend. And when he was on the city council in LA, he was the only city councilman in LA, and at that point, a major city in the country that we were aware of, who was training his constituents how to organize, knowing that that may be used against him at some point. But what Eric and I grew up as young organizers in college, together really understood was that when the people are empowered, politicians are more accountable and we're at our best. And so I will work with our movement organizations ultimately to empower them when needed, to push me and hold me accountable so that I will always be at my best in serving you. All right. The next one was from Ukiah, right?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I was glad to hear you talk about offshore wind energy earlier. I was going to ask if you could tell us, your top 2 or 3 environmental policy priorities that you would come in working on, and in addition to what top 1 or 2 things you would do to help the state convert to an alternative energy economy.
All right, I got the first part, but then the word got a little warbled just in the digital transmission. You said to help what be a clean energy economy?
To help the state become an alternative energy economy and move out dirty fossil fuels.
All right, no, thank you. Look, as far as top priorities, we will sign the Paris Accord, as I said, on Democracy Now! Before Trump pulled our country out of it. That's not settled. Time to become governor, we will sign it. Paris Accord, quite frankly, is a compromise document. We need to go much further. And so as a state, we will go further. I'm proud that we, as a state, folks like Jimmy Tarlow's on the phone, keep pushing us to be more and more aggressive in our goal of moving towards 100% clean and renewable energy. When I'm governor, we will actually have a plan to go all the way. Not to 25 or 50%, but all the way to 100%. And we'll keep looking for ways to speed it up. And there's a lot happening in industry that makes me hopeful that we'll keep being able to speed it up, because the technologies keep getting cheaper and more powerful, even faster than scientists predicted a few years earlier. So we'll sign the Paris Accord. We will make sure that we become even more aggressive about cleaning up our bay. There's 6 states in the Chesapeake Bay Alliance, and there's about $100 million that's been cut out of federal cleanup efforts, and we'll figure out a way to pass that and make sure we each put in our fair share to keep it going, and we'll look for ways to move faster. The reality is that the healthier the bay gets, the more we will benefit over time, and so that will be a high priority. And as somebody who lives these days in Pasadena, Maryland, right on the water, I'm deeply in touch because I'm on it. Often kayaking, really right next to the water, how many dead spaces there are, how fragile it is. I talk to neighbors about how fishes just come back to their dock, and crabs have just come back to their dock, and frankly, there's a lot that we can be done to pull people who voted for Trump into our movements, into voting the way we do, by being serious about those issues. And of course, I'll remind them that was basically $1 billion pushed through by Obama that has made that happen. But anyways, and then we will also really be focused on deploying clean energy here and on building it here. New Orleans and the economy of the Gulf Coast is inspiration to me, and how you can, for instance, turn coastal restoration into a vibrant industry for your state. So in addition to solar and clean, turbines, and figuring out how to be as competitive a place as possible for those to be built, while also keeping them, good jobs, and in the case of turbines, union jobs for the trades. We will also really seek to become the regional hub for coastal restoration, and tributary restoration. Part of how we will clean up our bay is cleaning up the rivers that feed into it, and part of that is making sure that we create sort of diverse ecologies at the edge of many farms so they can better trap the runoff and process it naturally. So those are some of the 3 big things that I will be focused on. All right, we've got several here online. They've gotten shorter, and got to find the right one. So hold on. Jimmy, Susan. This one is from iPhone. Assuming you win the primary, will you remain this progressive when challenging Hogan in the general election? If you will, how do you intend to stay progressive during the election, potentially as governor? You know, I have friends like Jimmy Tarlow who will haunt me in my sleep if I ever stray and wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm sure, just to cuss me out. No, look, guys, I will stay close to our values because I'll stay close to us. I've been a movement person my whole life, and am surrounded by movement people, and also surrounded by Black women activists, from my daughter who's 11 to my grandma who's 100, who have high standards for the sort of policies that I will push through. In each case, I'll be held accountable publicly and privately. You know, my grandma worked for Planned Parenthood in Baltimore in 1940, and she's sharp as a tack. Barbara Mikulski was her office mate's intern. And I talk to her every week, and she you know, holds me accountable. So that's how I'll be held accountable, both through our movement organizations, through voters, and through personal relationships, both for friends and family, who are very invested in me leading in the way that we know our leaders need to lead if our families are going to move forward. As far as you know, I don't know how to zigzag in politics. I've been consistent my entire life in fighting for justice, economic justice, social justice, inclusion, opportunity for all. I've been a movement leader, and I've got a track record that goes all the way back to my college days. You know, when I got kicked out of school for fighting for student aid and fighting against environmental racism. 2 protests ended up adding up to me being among the first students suspended from Columbia University for their politics since the 1970s. We were kicked out about 20 years later. And so I've always kind of been the same guy. I'll always be the same guy. And one of the things that convinced me to run was I sat down with a pollster who'd been a pollster for O'Malley, who'd been a pollster for Schmoke, he'd been a pollster for Van Hollen, folks, quite frankly, more mainstream than me, but really sought me out because he believes in our message. He would like to see folks move towards our politics. And he said, look, I think you have the best shot. And I said, okay, great. Why? He said, well, because you can be disruptive in the primary and you can be inspirational in the general. And I said, okay, but connect those dots. How do I have to run to be both? And he said, brother, just run to the left and keep running to the left. He said, in the general, you'll consolidate the activists and you'll win. In the primary, you'll consolidate the activists and you'll win. In the general, you'll activate new constituencies who typically don't vote in the midterms, and you'll win them too. And Donald Trump will build a firewall. Hogan's already getting rapidly less popular with voters. His would you vote for him numbers down to 41, floats about 25% below his do you like him number. And anonymous Democrats up to 37. So I'm confident, both because of what's in my gut and because occasionally you get sort of affirmations from folks who kind of invested in things like polling, that we can do this by just being ourselves, by being full-throated progressives who are on fire for defending civil rights, on fire for defending our environment, and on fire for ending poverty and expanding economic opportunity. And that's how I'll run. I don't see any more text questions.
Let me follow up on that, Ben.
Sure.
If you look at an electoral map of Maryland, there's a handful of blue counties.
Yeah.
And a lot of red counties.
Yes.
What Bernie stands for, and he showed an ability, though, to go into those red counties.
Yeah.
And talk with people and win them over.
Yep.
Can you give us an example of how you can do that in Maryland?
Yeah.
This goes to the heart of not smoothing out your progressive message.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, no, look, somebody asked me the other day if I'm running to the left, and I said, look, I'm running towards the people. Sometimes when you talk left and right, you sort of disown people, right? Because they see themselves on the right, even though if you listen to them, they're concerned about what you're concerned about. And I really believe that the most important divide in our country is between politicians who serve corporations and politicians who fight for the people. And I aspire to be the latter, because when I was a civil rights organizer and community organizer, that's what I've always done. When you do that, it's surprising what happens. I've made, just in the last about half dozen weeks, a half dozen trips to the Eastern Shore and a half dozen trips to Western Maryland. Been out in Garrett County the other night and was talking about single payer. And there were folks who had voted for Trump or not voted who were very clear that they would vote for me. One of the things that emboldened me is I've been out on Eastern Shore a week earlier, and there was a Trump voter, maybe 2 weeks earlier, two trips ago to Eastern Shore, and there was a Trump voter who presented the way a Trump voter might at one of my meetings, right? A real poker face. He raised his hand. Hi, Ben, I need to let you know I voted for Trump. I said, all right, good to meet you, sir. He said, what do you think of Trump voters? I said, well, I don't think you all are crazy. I think you could have made a better decision, but I don't think that you're crazy, just like I don't think voters who didn't vote are lazy. The polls will tell you both sets, people who voted for Obama and then voted for Trump, people who voted for Obama and then didn't vote, felt betrayed in the economy. It's a rational decision. I may disagree with it, but it's a rational decision. He said, okay, so now we established that. He said, I have one question for you. I said, what's that? He said, do you support single payer? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, then I'll vote for you and I'll organize other Trump voters too. I spent my whole life on a bridge. My father comes from northern New England. His family's lived there for hundreds of years. His brother, my favorite uncle, runs a lumber yard. I called him on election day. He didn't know if he said he didn't know if he was voting for Bernie or Trump. I knew that meant he was leaning towards Trump, because if he knew he was leaning towards Bernie, he would have said that to me. So I cussed him out. And then we had a real conversation about his frustration, what he sees running his lumber yard, and the fact that we need to get back to making things in this country again. And we need to get beyond the bad trade deals, and we need to really make it possible for men like him to feel like they're men again. And the other end of that bridge is in West Baltimore. And when I listen to my great uncles, 90 years old, or my cousins, you hear the same thing. Bethlehem Steel didn't just abandon South Baltimore and Dundalk, it abandoned us too. And so it's that sort of basic kind of the core convictions that come from that shared experience. I was talking to a young man today in West Baltimore who had buried 10 friends in the last year. And I was talking to a young white girl who came from tennis camp on the Eastern Shore 2 weeks ago who had buried 3 classmates in the last year. One, young people involved in the drug trade, the other young people addicted to opioids and heroin. And before that, it was a young Arab American, Muslim American professional who had just buried 2 honor students in Montgomery Village who had been riddled with 20 bullets. There's more that unites us than divides us in the state. And if we just talk about what our families need, better future, how we get there in very practical terms, we can unite a lot of people who are yearning to feel united but haven't been for a very long time.
Any more of these?
Yes.
Good question.
All right. So I'm going to take the one that's popped up, and there may be a couple before that. So if I don't answer your question, I'll get to it in a sec. Hey, did you get to Sean, Susan, and Jim? I know I got to Susan and Jim. We'll go back and check Sean. Jim McGee asks, how does money in politics play out in Maryland? What is your plan to get money out of politics? If it's part of your plan, how would you sell public financing or raise salaries of legislators? So, the question of raising the salaries of the legislators, this is not something I have a firm position on yet. I do have a lot of questions about it. I seem to meet a lot of our legislators who are also lobbyists. They claim to be lobbyists in Washington, but you got to believe that, he who pays the piper, as they say, or she who pays the piper calls the tune. So you got to believe that that has relevance for their work in Annapolis, and it concerns me. I'm also concerned about sort of a revolving around a small number of families with capital with immense amounts of power. And I think we need to have just an honest conversation about honesty, and then figure out where we go from there. But certainly professionalizing the legislature to a full-time legislature is an option that should be on the table. As far as selling public financing, I think it sells itself. I've been very involved in Howard County in selling it there. Unfortunately, the Republican who runs the county just vetoed it. I think he vetoed it for the reasons that the voters supported it, which is that it would empower the voters of Howard County, more of them to serve. And so we just need to get out and talk about how, who runs gets more diverse, more inclusive. Politics move more towards actually solving the kitchen table issues most voters care about. And we can build that movement. And we will win in Howard County eventually. That's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. How does money in politics, what's your plan to get money out of politics? Well, one of the things I've said on Democracy Now! Is I'm not going to support any corporate, I'm not going to take any corporate donations. Now, let's be clear, 15 to 40% of the money tends to come from corporate donations in Maryland gubernatorial elections. I'll be asking a lot more of each of you and of our neighbors and compatriots around the country to support my campaign. But my grandma raised me to always start the way I want to finish. And I'm going to start, without owing anything to a corporation. And let me be clear, I'll take money from it. Pretty much any individual. There's a lot of people, no matter what their job is, who believe in our politics. But I'm not going to take money from a corporation because they have a very specific agenda. And I don't want any strings tied to me in how I govern. I don't want to be worrying about how I'm going to finance my next campaign if I piss them off. Money in politics in Maryland is a problem. I've discovered it's not as bad as it is in some states. In Virginia, you can make unlimited contributions to the governor's race. In Maryland, it's capped at $6,000. And that's something we should be proud of. Although if you ever run for governor, you'll find it makes you work a lot harder. And that's a good thing. All right. I may have missed a question from Sean. I'm just trying to scroll through this slowly to find it. Yeah, I got to Sean's question, I believe. All right. Are there any more voice questions? I don't think we have any more written questions at the moment. Or if I miss one, do you want to just read it to me, please, and we'll take it. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, let me just thank everybody and thank Bob. Guys, we've recently made Bob our president here and really recognized his leadership. And we are, in the process of really formalizing this movement as the former treasurer of Our Revolution National. I helped kind of push that conversation forward. I know we're still working out the details. But I want to thank everybody who's given up their time on a Saturday for this call. I know you're going to have a robust conversation. It's this type of work, this work of love, not just for our families, and not just for our neighbors who we know, but for the strangers in our lives, that frankly adds dignity and purpose to our own lives and helps us sleep better at night, knowing that we're not just looking out for our family, but other people, even people whose names we may not know or faces we've never seen, are too. And so I really thank you for your work in our movement. And I look forward to getting to know each of you as I move throughout the state. We're in the midst of visiting every county over 60 days. If you would like for me to come to your county or to your house, please reach out. You can email Tara, T-A-R-A, at benjealous.com. Tara, T-A-R-A, at benjealous.com. And again, I'm just proud to have been part of standing up Our Revolution Maryland, and I'm deeply indebted to everybody who's continuing to help lead it forward. I hope that my campaign will make us stronger as we win. Thank you, and God bless.